Hi, everybody. Well, we will go again and get started. Hello from Chattanooga, Nova Scotia. So great to see everyone. All right. Well, we will go and get ahead and get started because we have a lot of prompts to get through today. For those of you for whom this is your first write-in, just a little bit of an overview of how this works. So during the write-in, we will be going through a short teaching section, but then the real kind of focus of the write-in is on prompts. So we will be going through a short teaching section, and then we'll have several prompts where we work through those together. And then you have the opportunity to share them in the chat if you want. When we get to the prompt section, you can either write on your computer, you can write on your, if you want to write on pen and paper or wherever else, that's totally fine. And you can either work on the prompts that I share with you, or you can work on something else if there's something that you would prefer to. So it's very, very flexible. And then after each prompt, we'll also have an opportunity to share with each other. If you want to share in the chat, please make sure that you select to send in the chat to everyone, so that way everyone can see it. If it's just hosts and panelists, which is what it defaults to, then only I can see it. So if you select to everyone from the dropdown, then everybody else can see it. Again, you do not have to share if you don't want to, or if you would like to share, you are more than welcome to. All right, so let's, with that out of the way, go ahead and dive in. So my name is Hayley. If I haven't met you already, I'm the head of education at ProWritingAid, and today we are talking about story beats. So before we get into our prompts, let's just first think on kind of what a story beat is. So a beat is basically the smallest unit of story. It's a moment in your writing when a character does something. I like to talk about story beats as kind of state changes. It's a point when a character is choosing something. So going from this choice to this choice, it might be a state change that's more of a realization. So they were operating under one assumption before, and at the moment of the beat, they have a new assumption, right? So it's these very, very small moments where something is changing for your character. It's a small moment in terms of kind of the time it takes up in your story, but beats can have anything from an insignificant consequence to a very, very serious consequence for your characters, depending on the beat. But again, I like to think about beats as kind of state changes where a character is going from one thing to another. Now, because beats are so small, the smallest unit of story, there are hundreds of them within every story. There are sometimes even dozens within a single scene. Most beats typically tend to be about a sentence or two, though some might be a little bit shorter and some might be a little bit longer. But the beat itself is really that moment where the change is happening. Again, that state change where someone goes from not understanding something to understanding something, from not taking action to taking action, or the reverse, from taking action to not taking action, or whatever it is. That kind of moment is the beat in the story. It's a time when there is a state change. And let's look at an example of this. Now we're going to look at an example from a script, because scripts often denote like specifically the word beat, which is an opportunity where there is like, the actor might actually take a beat to like rest, but they are also really helpful for us to look at as people who are interested in the craft of story, because they're typically places where the character is taking a beat because something is happening, right? Because there's some type of state change. So we here are looking at an example from the movie The Social Network, which is about the founding of Facebook. So we have two characters here, Mark and Erica, and you can see right here there, let me go back. You can see right here, there is a moment called beat, where Erica takes a beat and says, I was kidding, right? Now, in this particular scene, the two characters are kind of arguing about something, and that beat is where Erica has a state change. She goes from kind of making fun of Mark, she's kind of telling him, or she's kind of poking fun at him about something he really cares about. And then he says something to her and Erica's state changes. She changes from teasing him to realizing that this is actually a much more serious conversation than the conversation she thought she was having. So this is an example of a state change. Erica's state has changed from being kind of jovial and laughing with Mark to realizing that this is incredibly serious for him. Now, this state change is not just a change for Erica, it's going to change how she interacts in the scene that comes from that. It's also signifying an increase in tension. So the state change is showing that Erica, who she is and how she's going to react for the rest of the scene is going to change. It's also kind of ratcheting up the tension of this scene, which means that the subsequent beats that happen will probably continue with the tension until there reaches a beat where, the tension erupts or something like that. But this is a great example of kind of what a beat is. It's a single moment, a single snapshot within a scene where, again, one character experiences a state change. Now, obviously, in a movie script, it's going to happen in dialogue, but it does not always have to happen in dialogue. It can also happen just through a character's observations or internal thoughts or anything like that. But it's basically a point where there has been a fundamental shift, some type of state change for your character. So keeping all of that in mind, that beats are state changes, we are going to work through a series of prompts today. So we're going to focus on bigger beats here. And I want to start, yes, Jack, a beat can be an internal realization where the character doesn't shift in action. Beats do not have to always be related to action. So if the character goes from like not understanding to understanding, that is a beat as well. So it's not always an action beat. Sometimes it can be emotional or anything like that too. So we're going to start simple by just making a list. This first list, oops, I started this, but I should not have. Our first list is just going to be making a list of the 5 biggest moments of change your protagonist will go through in your story. And just like Jack asked in the chat, it could be an internal realization that they have. It could be a point where they take action. It could be both, right? We have up to 5 here. So we'll start with 5 minutes to make, again, a list of the 5 biggest moments of change your protagonist will go through in your story. Again, you can note them down on a piece of paper, you can note them down on your computer, or you can share them in the chat, or all 3. So I will start the timer with 5 minutes beginning now. Okay, that is our first 5 minutes. So as you can see, some people are dropping their beats into the chat. Now, I just want to say a couple quick things. So for a lot of us, our story beats, remember, are going to be like the precise moment where something happens. So I had given feedback to Ian on his first beat on escaping gunfire. So escaping gunfire is like often a sequence, right? And so when we think about like the sequence of escaping gunfire, there will probably be multiple beats within that sequence. There might be like the first beat is the gunfire happens. The second beat is when I'm just giving examples. Obviously, I don't know Ian's story, but the second beat is when the protagonist turns around and realizes who's pursuing him. And then he runs some more. And then the third beat is when he like finds a hiding place, right? So oftentimes, again, is for the purposes of this kind of higher scale exercise, this is totally fine. But I just want us all to be thinking as we start to list out these beats, like what is that true snap decision when the state changes? So in terms of escaping gunfire, there's probably there are multiple beats that happen within that sequence. So is the biggest beat there for the biggest moment of change for the character? Is it the actual escape of the gunfire at that point, or is it understanding who's shooting them, right? It depends on obviously the story that you're writing and the type of protagonist that you have. But, you know, if they're hunting an unknown, or if they're going up against an unknown assailant, the biggest moment might be them understanding who's shooting at them. Whereas if it is something where like they know who's shooting at them and they're in danger, then the escape itself might be the kind of biggest moment of change. So again, by getting super precise about like who your character is and what the exact moment in a larger sequence is can help you set up the scene a little bit more effectively. So again, just something for all of us to be thinking about as we are putting these beats out. What is that? What is the most significant moment? And that, because there will be a lot of other beats in it. And for most of these scenes that we're talking about, those scenes are going to have multiple beats. So thinking through again, you know, exactly what is the moment that's going to take us from one moment to the next, and which will be the most significant there. Okay, so just looking through a couple others. So for instance, Nell having the main character realizing they're a loner and committing to changing that commitment to the change. That scene, again, is likely going to have multiple beats within it, leading up to the realization that the main character is a loner. So when you're thinking about the most significant one of those beats, is it the moment where the main character writes, I'm going to change this in my journal? Or is it, you know, the moment where that main character has the realization of, oh, I have been abandoning all my friends, or whatever it is. So again, the more that you can pinpoint precisely in my scene, what am I working towards, the more effective it can be. We have some really cool stories here, which is really exciting. Lots of detectives coming to realizations, which is good. Having the name called during a daydream. Fighting to defend her family and thinks my Amazon, tending to the children. They're starving, blaming the mother. Yes. Okay. So there's some really good examples too here of the like kind of precise moments where this is happening. I believe somebody had said something like there was an earthquake. I saw that one. But yes, exactly. We want to get into these kind of precise moments where this is happening, and that's the precise state change that's happening. Okay, so now that we have our 5 biggest ones, we're going to build off of that. So let's go to our second prompt. All right, so now we're going to get nitty gritty, just like I was talking about. I want you to pick one of those beats. I want you to then add the 3 beats that happen right before it and the 3 beats that happen right after it. So one of the big 5 that you just picked, 3 beats that happen before it and 3 beats that happen right after it. And just like I was talking about with Ian, it might be something like, you know, the moment that the protagonist hides in a shed, right, is the moment that they escape. That's the biggest one. But the beats before that were you know, broke into a car, whatever it is, broke into a car, got into a fight, etc. So we're going to back up and have our beats again before the biggest moment and our beats right after the biggest moment as well. Now I want you to get very granular on these. We were thinking on a big scale before, but I want you to get very specific within the scene. So if you think about even like the climax scene of a movie, right? The climax scene of a movie doesn't end at the moment of climax, right? The moment where the main character has a realization, that's one beat. But then the main character turning to their lover or whatever, that's still within the same scene. That's kind of the climax. So when you're thinking about these moments of change, the three things that are right before and right after, remember we're thinking small here. So we're thinking within the same scene. What are the three things that happen within one scene and then right after it? Now, again, when we're talking about beats, these could be actions that people take, or they could be emotions that they have. So one beat could be something like realization. The next beat might be sadness, right? Beats can happen really, really quickly. So your main character might realize that the locket they have is their mother's all along. And then the next thing they do with it is hold it tight, close to it, feeling overwhelmed with love. Like those could all be beats, again, as long as we're having those moments of change. So three things that happen right before, three things that happen right after it. Again, thinking within the same scene on that kind of micro level through actions. We'll have a little bit more time for this one. We'll have 7 minutes. And if you want to get more than 3, you can feel free to add more than 3. Or if you alternatively want to work on 2 of your beats as opposed to one of the 5 that you just highlighted, you can do that too. All right, here we go. Okay, that is 7 minutes, and some of the stuff in this chat is amazing. And no worries, Isabel. You do not have to worry. I think you can hit shift, and then that does not send it until later. But even if you send it in one, all good. We don't care. So I wanted to highlight Nell Neiman's had a really great example of kind of was one of the first ones that came in and was a really great example of kind of how these work in the scene, right? So I believe the one that we had talked about previously was the fifth one, which is the realization that this moment is true, that the main character is a loner, or it was actually kind of like the recommitment. But if we break this scene into smaller pieces, we have, again, a bunch of beats. Now, I want to highlight the difference between a beat and just like a scene and dialogue. So our first beat, right? So beats can be sentences, and they are sentences, but they're going to be connected by kind of the connective tissue of action and of dialogue. So in Nell's example, the therapist is going to ask the main character what he has in common with his boss, right? So this kind of kicks off the scene. Now, between that beat and the next one, which is the main character deflecting the question, there are going to be several moments, right? Like there might be conversation, there might be several things that the main character says. Perhaps the main character adopts kind of a defensive body posture or looks out the window. All of those things are like the connective tissue, which is happening between the first beat, the asking what the main character has in common, and the second beat, which is the main character deflecting the question. Now, again, these are the beats because they're the moments where a state change is happening. So the deflection is potentially the main character going from engaging with the conversation to refusing to engage with the conversation. Same thing where, we go from the beat of the therapist suggesting that men are loners and the main character becoming defensive and irate, right? And then even more between 4 and 5, like going from defensive to internal and irate to internal realization, there's going to be some connective tissue that happens there, which might be in the form of dialogue. It might be in the form of the main character having an internal monologue where he's thinking about something. All of that kind of stuff is happening in between these. So again, as we get further into these prompts and approach the point where we'll write a full scene with this, I want you to be thinking that the beats are not just everything that is in your scene. However, they can be kind of like a roadmap that helps you get from one place to another. So you can understand kind of where you're starting and where you're going. And I often find them really helpful, particularly for scenes that I'm struggling to write, because they're like the little roadmap points of where I want to go. Okay. And Steph, don't worry, we'll have plenty of other options to go through this. So no worries if you wrote the full scene, it is totally okay as well. This is often just a good exercise to get you to the place where you are ready to write the scene. Okay, so let's see some of our others. So we have got Alexandra, who has the first beat, the character is waking up drenched in sweat. And doesn't hear the sound downstairs. She sees the back of her mother, a suitcase in her hand, as her mother enters a car she doesn't recognize. So we have a state change here where the character is going from confusion to something else. Then she turns to find someone's mother running after her, a boarder in the boarding house. Yes, so we've got kind of all of the sequence of moments. We've got actually, honestly, even multiple beats in some of these. So Ben understanding that the mother or telling the character that the mother will not be coming back or will be coming back. And then the realization could also ultimately be two separate beats, again, depending on kind of what the connective tissue is between. If there are moments where the main character is reviewing things in her brain or that type of thing, it might be more connective tissue. Whereas if it is truly just kind of one to the next, it might be a separate beat. Okay, these are awesome. And we are now going to write basically everything else that is going to happen in that scene. So some of us were a little ahead of that, which is totally fine. You can either continue working on that scene or write an additional scene. But I want you to think about one of those kind of moments of change that you just worked on with all the beats, and you can either write a scene for that or you can write a scene for something else. I'm actually going to increase this timer because writing scene in 7 minutes is hard for me. So I'm going to increase this to 10 minutes, and then we will have 10 minutes to work on this scene. Oh, actually, sorry, we're not even getting to the writing point. We'll get to the writing now, actually. I think a lot of us have gotten to the other points. So we'll do 10 minutes to write out this full scene, and then we'll connect from there. All right. Okay, so 10 minutes to write the scene with the prompt that you just worked on. Or if you've already written that one, you can continue to edit it, or you can write something else. Let me enter the presenter mode, and then our 10 minutes will begin. All right, here we go. Okay, those were our 10 minutes. I saw Liz right now steam. No worries at all, Liz. I totally hear you. I when I do the write-ins, I'm always like it's 50-50 of if I'm ever able to like get stuff in there or if I'm just tired. So sounds like a couple people are overwhelmed. So here's what we should do. Let's take, since we have some time, let's take the next 10 more minutes to do this again. And if you want to just sit and brainstorm and doodle, that's fine. If you want to have some more time to work on that scene, that's also fine. If you want to work on a different scene, that is also fine. I've been working on the same scene to open a short story I've been working on for a week and a half. So any version of this is all good. I keep rewriting the same 400 words. So all of that is all good. Story beats and scenes can be really exhausting. So we'll do another 10 minutes for those of us that are feeling overwhelmed. Again, a few options. One, just like hang out. You don't have to do anything at all. That's totally fine. A second option is if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling like you don't want to write, but you do want to just make progress, that's actually where I think story beats can be really helpful. So sometimes I will just write out beats over and over and over, and I'll rearrange and I'll take some in and take some out. It's a good way to like make progress without actually having to do a lot of writing because you can just kind of jot them in shorthand. So if you're feeling super overwhelmed, like a few people have mentioned, you can just jot beats. You don't have to write at all. If you are working on a scene you really like, you can keep it going. You can edit it. You can keep the scene going if you haven't finished it, or you can just work on something totally different. But it seems like a couple people need some more time. So let's take another 10 minutes to work on this, and then we will come back together. Again, all versions are okay. So I'll start the timer one more time. All right. That is our second one. Okay, so somebody asked, we'll go through a couple questions and then we can go through. But somebody asked, I don't understand the difference between a beat and a scene. So I think the easiest way to explain that is that a scene has many beats in it. So there are multiple beats within a scene. If you want to use some more kind of common terms, you can think about a beat as, or every scene as having like a climax and inciting incident and those types of things. Those moments are often the beats in a scene, but basically every scene is going to have up to dozens of beats within it. So the beats are basically like specific moments within a scene. So yeah, so they're kind of the smallest unit of story in that way. Now, I will say that the term beat is often used interchangeably for multiple points. So sometimes like a beat sheet, for instance, is like, if you're looking at a beat on like the story level, people will use the term beat sheet, like the Save the Cat beat sheet or something like that, to refer to moments within the story that are like part of a larger scene. So your inciting incident beat, or you have like the Save the Cat beat on like the theme stated, right? So that's a moment at the beginning of the story where the overall theme of the story is stated. So in that instance, beat is used to refer to like the moment where the theme of the story is stated and there's like a scene surrounding it. But the way that we're talking about beats, again, you can talk about them at that larger story level, but within each scene, there will be like beats, which are these kind of moments of change. So they're used super interchangeably and in a lot of different ways. But again, most scenes are made up of beats. And then sometimes you'll hear, again, particularly for stories, either scripts or things that are using something like Save the Cat, which uses a beat sheet, that it is like the moments within a story that make up kind of like a larger outline. So you might refer it, or you might hear it referred to that way. But I think either way, what I would recommend is thinking about a beat as a moment of change. So it could be moments of change within a specific scene as the scene's tension increases or decreases. It could also be moments of change within your larger plot, right? As your plot, as the rising action for your plot, et cetera, gets more significant or less significant. So either way, moments of change, but sometimes they're referred to on like the macro level through the whole story, and sometimes they're referred to on the micro level within a specific scene. And I think, again, beats are really helpful if you're feeling lost either way. So they're super helpful if you're feeling lost on your story level, you could return to your story beats, or they, if you're lost in the scene, you can do the same exercises of what happens next in this particular scene. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I know beats can be really kind of challenging, and they can also kind of get you a little bit lost because you can get like really, really granular with beats, or like we just talked about, you can go really large scale with beats and talk about them on the story level. But I think it's really helpful. This is a super useful exercise that I come back to when I am finding myself lost. I just ask myself, what's the next state change and how do I connect the dots from this place to the next? And yes, Jack, my cat is here. So thank you all so much for your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. And we'll see you next month for the write-in. And if you are on our email list, keep an eye out because our fantasy week registration is going to go out tomorrow. So you'll see that tomorrow. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.